Sego, it is January 19th, 2018. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, and no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and simulcast on the Gway, CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us at www.ltnradionet.com. And, of course, we are streaming live here on Facebook. I am John Kane. I'm your show's host and producer, and I'm joined in studio by Jake Proud, who is manning my soundboard and the cameras for our Facebook live stream and for what ultimately will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I encourage you to check out our YouTube channel. Subscribe. If you subscribe, then you'll get notifications for not only the postings of these shows, but notifications for when we post shorter videos. And we will be doing more of that, especially as we get into this year. We have some pretty good plans for doing a lot. We do have a decent studio. We haven't used it as much lately as I would have liked. Sometimes it gets a little tough during the winter months, but yeah, we will be doing more of those. Hey, the opening song, which was "Little White Lies" by Pappy John's band, of course, Murray Porter on vocals, and we're going to talk about well, I guess truth will finally tell, or time will finally tell, just what are lies and what are not lies. So, one of the things that I haven't talked about much lately has been the fight between the Senecas and the state over the gaming revenue. Obviously, I had a lot to say about it early on. It's been over a year that the revenue sharing provision expired between the Seneca Nation and the state of New York, which ultimately took that revenue sharing, 25% of that revenue sharing with the state, and sent back to municipalities, Niagara Falls, the city of Buffalo, and the city of Salamanca, and the counties enjoyed some of that revenue as well. And I say enjoyed. That's with an ed, as in past tense. That was over a year ago. There hasn't been any payments made for this year term. The last payment was made in the spring, but it was essentially made, brought it up to December of last year. So where is it? Well, there's been a lot of commentary back and forth. The governor has said some what I think are some pretty outrageous things. I mean, not the least of which is his claim that the Senecas have a history of breaking agreements, which is, on the face of it, so absurd and defies anybody's even most rudimentary understanding of history and how many treaties both the state of New York and the federal government have entered into and violated. I mean, for the governor of the state of New York to say the Senecas have a history of breaking agreements, when he himself has been involved in clear breaches of the Seneca Gaming Compact and that kind of stuff, it's absurd. But So where is it now? I mean, the Senecas haven't paid anything. The state has essentially pulled the trigger on the arbitration clause of the Gaming Compact, which is a set of provisions within the Gaming Compact that says how the state and the Senecas will resolve conflict. That arbitration clause has some things that are very clear. One of the things is that each side appoints one of the arbitrators that will be part of a tribunal that will hear the case. There is some question on how the third arbitrator gets picked. I mean, in some of the most basic language, it says that the state's selected arbitrator and the Seneca Nation's selected arbitrator will choose the third. It seems like that's not exactly the way it's playing out. It sounds like the state is not just deferring that decision to their chosen judge in this case, but are trying to be more active in this thing. So we'll see what happens with that. There's even some conversation about deferring the third arbitrator to the American Arbitration Association, which to me is still not serving the Seneca's best interest. Because let's face it, the compact is not something that is of the Seneca Nation's making. the state's system of judicial system is not something of the Seneca nation's making. The fact that and when they enter into arbitration, the state and the Senecas should be on equal footing, and that they're following the rules, I guess, of this, again, not a state system, but a system that really mimics, the colonizers' system of jurisprudence. Even the American arbitration system, although it's not, or system or association is not a state court, it is still the making of of those people, of that system. So I don't think the Seneca Nation deferring to the American Arbitration Association for resolution on this third arbitrator, it still seems like they're accepting a deck stacked against them. They got not only the state, but now this association, which is more akin to the state than to the Seneca Nation. So, I mean, that's my opinion, and we'll see how the thing plays out. But so that's where we're at. There has been no real movement. I don't even know if they've actually solved the one of the initial conflicts, which was when the state said, well, this arbitration should take place in New York City as opposed to Western New York. I mean, I don't even know if they've resolved that. The only thing that has really been accomplished is the state has selected their arbitrator and the Seneca Nation has selected theirs, but nothing more than that. So it begs the question on well, how's the process going? Well, slow, and for all of the the commentary that has come from the state, and for all of the griping and all of the real life circumstances that have placed not just Niagara Falls and Salamanca, but even Buffalo is talking about huge shortfalls in their system. In fact, they've kind of burned through their funds that they had set aside for for such conditions where certain dollars might have shortfalls in city revenue. They burned through any of that bank of money that they had, and I want to say something to the tune of over 25 million. I think they're down to the last few $1 million. So the city of Buffalo isn't really in that great shape either. Clearly Niagara Falls is out of money at this point, and they're blaming it all on this lack of gaming revenue. Salamanca, from what I understood, the gaming revenue that they got back from the state via the Senecas represented something like 51% of their operating budget, and there seemed to be no contingency plan for these guys to make up those shortfalls. So, and I have to add that the offer that the Senecas made for Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and Salamanca to come to the table to work something out, at least a service agreement or something, so any claim that these municipalities may be making for lost revenue because of these gaming facilities in their neighborhood would at least be defrayed. They haven't come. Nobody stepped to the table here, but here's I have to say the reason or the answer that has been coming from everything from city officials, the mayors of these cities, and all the way up to the governor. And that's their claim and their anticipation that the Senecas will pay. That's what they keep saying. Comptrollers and county officials, they all keep saying the same thing. Well, we're pretty optimistic the Senecas will pay. Even though the Senecas have said, no, we aren't going to return to a revenue sharing arrangement with the state of New York. Time and time again, no matter who is spoken to that represents anybody from these local municipalities all the way up to the governor's offices, well, we anticipate that we will prevail in arbitration or wherever, and ultimately the Senecas will pay. Everybody keeps saying. All these white guys are saying the same thing. Senecas will pay. Senecas will pay. Senecas will pay. And of course, why do they say that? Well, what's the history? The history is the Senecas paid. The arbitration clause was used one time before. The Senecas pushed for the arbitration because the state was breaching the compact, breaching the revenue sharing provision of the compact. So they took it to arbitration, but it didn't go through arbitration. The Senecas cut a deal with the state and essentially bailed on arbitration. They cut not just a deal, they cut a check, $400 million to the state of New York, and they were in a good position to win. The state was clearly in breach, and after the governor got the check, the big check, the big ones they hold up on TV, yeah, after he and Deister and from Niagara Falls and the mayor of Buffalo and Byron Brown and the mayor down in Salamega, after they all did their photo ops with the big check, then the governor says, the Senecas did have a valid claim. It's not what he was saying leading up to that, and that certainly wasn't what was coming out of the mouths of people like Paul Deister, the mayor of Niagara Falls. Paul Deister said, well, we should, if that casino catches on fire, we should just let it burn. The people who go there, they may be gamblers, but they may not want to gamble with their lives. That was his quote. They may be gamblers, but they may not want to gamble with their lives by going to a casino that does not have the protection of a fire department, because he was claiming that he would not allow his fire department to go, go to the casino. I mean, that's how bad this conversation was going. But Senecas were in a good position in arbitration, and the governor put pressure on, and ultimately the Senecas bailed on arbitration, cut a check for $400 million. Yeah, they got to keep $200 million of the escrowed funds, so they didn't. It wasn't for nothing. But the state got $400 million. $400 million. And so even if you wanted to suggest, okay, well, the state did lose and surrendered $200 million for what they breached, yeah, they may have forfeited a third of the escrow funds. But you know what? They didn't forfeit a third of the percentage that they were getting paid. In fact, the Senecas would go on and pay 25% of the net slot drop up until last year, up until December of 2016. 25%. And as I've said before, it wasn't just 25% of some sort of net. It was 25% of the net slot drop, which as it was figured was really just 25% of the total slot drop minus the payouts. So all of the other overhead associated with the slot machines, including the building around it, the slot attendants, the labor, the equipment itself, the payments and the leases and the licenses and the all of that stuff for the very machines. The state didn't. It never came out of the state's cut. Only came out of the Seneca's cut. So you could argue that it wasn't 25% of the slot revenue. It was more like 45 or 50% of the slot revenue, because on the 75% that the Senecas retained, they had to cover all of the expenses, all of them. The state just got a check. And they got a check all the while they were competing directly against the Seneca Nation with their racetrack casinos, which they had to stop calling casinos as a part of the settlement. They didn't change anything except for what they called them. So now they went back to calling them racinos. They were no longer calling them casinos, and they were no longer calling them slot machines. They were just calling them electronic gaming machines. But the Senecas bailed on that arbitration in 2013. Cut the big check. Big in size and big in number. And so that is why state officials today and city officials today are saying, we'll just get the Senecas to do what they did last time. Yeah, sure, we're in arbitration, and even though arbitration may look good for them, and here's what I got to say. Even the folks who think the Senecas are right, and there's some Republicans, the ones who don't necessarily support Deister or Brown or Cuomo, who think the Senecas are right. And in fact, I've had Bob Batson on the show. Somebody who actually I'm not only on this show, but I spoke with Bob Batson on Susan Arbetter's show in Albany, and as an unbiased legal scholar, teaches at the Albany Law School. He felt the Senecas were right. But even though the folks who think the Senecas are right still think the Senecas are going to pay. Now, here's what I will say. There has been no indication that the Senecas are going to pay from the Senecas. There has been no suggestion that they are caving or thinking about making a deal. But there's also been almost nothing out of the Senecas. There's been no strong statements opposing, whether it's a county controller or or a governor or a mayor or anybody. Everybody who keeps saying, "Oh, the Senecas are going to pay," or we feel confident we will that we will resolve this thing. And keep in mind, none of these guys have sat down with the Senecas. So all of these folks, whether it's the most local city legislators, assemblymen, county county legislators, all of them are still banking on the Senecas paying the state, not paying them directly, not making some sort of deal with Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and Salamanca, but returning to paying the state. And what does that look like? Here's what that looks like. It looks like 120, 150, $200 million a year to the state. That's what the Senecas have been paying to the state. And what happens? 25% of that trickles back. So when a Buffalo official says, well, we're confident the Senecas will return to revenue sharing with the state, they're banking on the Senecas sending 120 to $200 million to the state, so $7 million can come back to the city of Buffalo. So they're perfectly fine with $100 million leaving Western New York, never to come back, as long as they can get $5 or $6 million, $6 or $7 million. I mean, that's the lack of vision and forward looking that these local politicians have. They're okay with essentially over the course of this next 7 years, it would be $1 billion. $1 billion. They're okay with another $1 billion. $1 billion already left Western New York because of the old deal, the one that expired. But Buffalo, Niagara Falls, Salamanca, they're okay with $1 billion leaving the area as long as something trickles back to them. Let them get their $6 or $7 million a year, or let Niagara Falls get their $14 or $15 million a year. That's all they care about. They don't care about money being sucked out of the region. And that's why they won't come to the table. Arbitration or not, they still could come to the table. They still could work out a service agreement with the Seneca Nation. There's nothing that precludes that from happening. And you know what? The last time they could have done that too. The Senecas offered over and over again during the whole period of time they were holding money in escrow. They said, we're willing to make payments to Niagara Falls. We're willing to make payments to Buffalo. We're willing to make payments to Salamanca. The only thing that we insist is that when we get this whole thing settled with the state, if we've paid Niagara Falls and Buffalo and Salamanca, we want to make sure that we got credit for paying that as a part of this revenue sharing. And the state said no. Governor said no. Nope. Screw Niagara Falls. They're going to hold out like we are. And in fact, when folks from Niagara Falls said to the governor, is there any plans for you to help Niagara Falls with their shortfall? And you know what the governor's response was? Do you have any plans to help us with ours? That's literally what he told the folks from Niagara Falls. Do you have any plans to help us with our shortfall? I mean, that's the arrogance that this guy has. I mean, it's kind of incredible. So, but again, the ones who are noticeable, the state's not silent on this thing. I mean, I'm not saying that you're hearing the governor, in the news every day, but you know what? The governor's riding some of his highest approval ratings since his, in his whole tenure as the governor. So he doesn't need to cause a bit of a storm on this thing. But in the meantime, hey, you can find somebody at least once a week offering some sort of comment about how they anticipate the Senecas are going to pay, and whether it comes from a county or a city or an area legislator or the Albany directly. I mean, you can have that conversation, and you can hear that conversation, but you don't hear anything coming out of the Senecas. So you're not hearing that strong statement saying, no, we aren't paying. And that's our position. Of course, the Senecas can say, well, we're just going to be coy about this thing. We're in arbitration. We'll just let it go. But you know what? There still isn't, even from the Seneca people, there isn't a conversation. And I think that's part of what is a concern. I think there should be something said on a regular basis. And I think the Seneca people should say, hell no, our gaming corp isn't going to pay the state. No, and we would absolutely oppose any deal making. I mean, I think the basic Seneca should say that. I'm not saying necessarily to the press or whatever else. But I'll tell you who they should definitely say it to: the people who represent them, the Seneca leadership. And I'm going to go there a little bit in the show today, because what I want to kind of visit is this whole notion that, and this is for native or non-native, when you have somebody who represents you, whether they're elected or put up in some sort of traditional manner, and no matter how it happens, those people who some will call the leadership, the question is, what is their responsibility to you? Is it to just have you been stripped of authority that they now wield? Is that really the way the system works? I mean, I don't even know if that's the way it works in the state. I know that's not really the way it works, how it's ever worked for Native people traditionally. When somebody, even within our traditional process, within the Haudenosaunee or the Algonquin-Cessna, the Longhouse, somebody who bears a title is not granted authority. But quite the opposite. They've actually been saddled with a responsibility. Their voice is no longer the relevant voice. It's the voice of their quote-unquote constituency, the people they represent, that becomes more important. Their job is to carry the voice of the people that they represent. They are servants of the people, not the lords and masters of them. Now, we have seen abuse of authority, and we've seen it at every level. I mean, and sometimes it's not even authority; it's abuse of power that comes with wealth or position. So whether it's at the corporate level, and whether it's some of these sexual harassment and assault charges that that have affected everybody from sports to media to to government. There's an abuse of power. And the worst abuse among the worst abuses of power are the abuses of authority. And authority and power are not necessarily the same thing, because authority assumes that there is a place that authority has been granted from, and I think that is the problem. And I've seen it in the Haudenosaunee. When people say honor the chiefs, or it's our responsibility to do whatever the chiefs say, no, that is not. We don't have a chief system. And if we do, that's a problem. What we're supposed to have is a clan system. But even when I look at the Seneca Nation, when people are elected, those 16 counselors, I mean, I've seen, the Seneca Nation Constitution is only a few pages long. I mean, literally. I mean, it is a tiny little couple of page handbook. If in the handbook form, it's tiny. But if you were to print out the Seneca Nation Constitution in full length pages, it might be 3 pages of text, maybe 4 full pages of text. And I'm not saying it to criticize it. I'm saying there's not a whole lot of there. I mean, there isn't a whole lot that says that defines the authority. Responsibilities, yeah. So when 16 counselors are elected, are they selected or elected to lead their people or to represent their people? Because I got to tell you, if you elected somebody to represent you, and look, this goes for whether the person who won the election, and this is native or not native, whether you voted for them or not, their job is still to represent you. So what do you do to ensure that they represent you? Well, one of the things you got to do is talk to these people. I mean, you got to talk to these people. You have to, whether there's a system in place for that line of communication, or whether you just go down and you walk in their office or you knock on the door or whatever else. I mean, I gotta tell you, one of the most abused expressions I hear from any politician, native or non-native, my door is always open. Is it? Is it? Is your door open? Can anybody walk in and talk to you? And I'm not just talking about anybody, but the people that you represent. And it may be, because here is part of the problem. When we talk about abuse of authority, and there is, we see that. I've seen it in native territories and I've seen it in non-native territories. But here's the other thing that I see. And I may see this even more often than I see that abuse of authority. And that is the yielding of authority to those people. How many people involve themselves in a process so superficially that they have no role in in community decisions short of casting a vote. That is not the end of your civic responsibility. I don't care where that is. Even if it's not a vote, even if it's sitting at a clan with your clan. I don't want to say a clan meeting because people will interpret that the wrong way. But sitting with your clan to choose a representative. The whole idea is that you stay engaged and that you make sure that those people are fulfilling the responsibility to you and to your neighbor, or to somebody else in your clan. If we don't hold the people accountable, or if we just say, it's not my job, I elected you to do it. If we do that, if we pass the buck, if we continuously say, that's what I voted for you for. That's your job, not my job. If we say that, then what we've done is we've yielded, we've forfeited, we've given our response, our whatever our personal authority, our birthright for all intents and purposes. I mean, whether it's laid out in a constitution or the system, if we don't hold them accountable, then why should they be accountable? Because how do they know what your view is if you don't tell them? So that's what I come back to. But look, we're at the bottom of the hour. I'm gonna take a break here. I got a few updates I want to do, but I want to stay on this a little bit because I also got to talk about how I mentioned it in the last show about how badly the state's casinos are doing, and why that matters in the conversation that should be still playing out between the Senegas and the state or the local governments. So we'll talk about it when we come back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We'll be right back.
trouble in the wigwam.
There was a song came on the radio, a guitar instrumental, and it changed everything.
Link Ray, it's rock and roll.
Rumble. Yeah, that's the one.
Rumble.
Hey, Rumble.
Rumble had the power to help me say, I'm going to be a musician.
And then I found out that he was an Indian.
The music that we know here in the United States is fully supported by input from Native and Indigenous people.
Seago, this is John Kane from WBAI's Let's Talk. Join me on January 31st at 7 p.m. at the Brooklyn Commons, 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, as we kick off 2018 with a free screening of Rumble, the Indians Who Rocked the World. All right, thanks for coming back. Hey, that's my my promo for using the audio from the trailer of Rumble. That's my promo for the screening that I will be doing in Brooklyn on the 31st of January at 7 p.m. Look, I know that most of you who listen here are local here to Seneca territory, or on the Guay or other places. But if you happen to be in New York at the end of the month, I think I'd love to see some people from home. I'd love to see some people from this neck of the woods join me at the Brooklyn Commons. And if you haven't seen the film, you should see the film. I mean, it is a very good film. It's it's not just educational from a music standpoint. It is far more than that. So I'd love for you to join me and not only see the film, but we have a nice dialogue afterwards, and it's usually a good time. It's a good gathering there at the Brooklyn Commons. Great place, 388 Atlantic Avenue. It is there's a cafe on the ground floor of the Brooklyn Commons. We actually broadcast BAI broadcast from the third floor, but the downstairs is a really nice cafe with a media room in the back on the ground floor, and that's where we do this thing. So it'd be great if some local folks made it down there. But for those of you who may be catching the show in New York, the promos for you. The promo is actually one that I air on WBAI, so I just think it's important to share it here as well. So I wanted to say that. Look, before I get back into it, let me give a shout out to my sponsors, Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White in ERW Enterprises, my good friend Ed Schindler, Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, and Sugar Montour. I want to thank you guys. You guys enable me to do what I do. And the thing is, there's nobody else doing this, and so without your support, I wouldn't be able to not only do this show, which is well into its eighth year, but I wouldn't be able to do the New York show. I wouldn't be able to travel to New York and there I do a 2-hour show offering a Native perspective, talking about the issues that are very, very important to us. And it's our chance to have our voice, my voice, carrying our issues to the New York City radio market, one of the largest radio markets in the media markets in the world. So I want to thank all of you for joining in the fight and doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream, Apache Radio Net. I want to thank them for providing our streaming. And I want to thank CKWE, both for their simulcast and the rebroadcast, as well as Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying Let's Talk Native on their networks. I also want to thank all of you who share the show. My wife is pretty reliable about getting this video, the Facebook live streams shared while we're live, and that's what really cranks up our views. We got close to 2,000 views on my last show. It'd be nice to hit that every week. I'm not exactly sure what a view is, but it's a good number, and I'm pleased to see that. But I know some of you also share the SoundCloud audio, which is the audio by alone. Which look, if you got SoundCloud on your phone, you don't have to see my mug. You can just listen to the show. And we do 2 1-hour shows here for Let's Talk Native. It makes it so it's a little easier to get through. You don't have to dedicate 2 hours of your life like those who listen in New York. It's fairly bite sized. So I mean I appreciate all of you who share the SoundCloud audio, and I also appreciate those who share this show on Facebook after the fact when it's no longer live, but it's a chance to see the video in its entirety, and also the YouTube videos. Those anybody who's sharing the links and posting the YouTube videos on Twitter or whatever, I appreciate all of it because it makes people more aware of. Yeah, granted, it's my perspective, but it's a native perspective, if not the native perspective. So I appreciate all of you doing that. Hey, look, a couple of things. February 14th is Valentine's Day, but it's also a day that there are vigils happening in many places, predominantly cities, throughout Turtle Island, to honor women and to raise the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Now, one of the things that was done a few years ago that I started sending out and actually got some traction was what was the red dress campaign. And the whole idea with the red dress is hanging a red dress and photographing it, putting them in prominent places. So what those red dresses, those empty red dresses represent is our missing women, missing and oftentimes murdered Indigenous women. So the red dress campaign, and what I'm encouraging everybody to do is just to hang a red dress, whether it's one or whether it's 10, and hang them. I've got it posted where some dresses were hung in a young wooded area, kind of a virgin wooded area, small trees, saplings. But hang them in the woods, hang them by a road, hang them by a river, because we've had some of our women washed up on rivers. Hang them by a highway, hang them by a railroad track, hang them in front of a courthouse or a state house, hang them in front of a bank that funds the fossil fuels industry that leads to the man camps, that leads to our women turning up missing. Hang a red dress, hang a dozen red dresses, photograph it, videotape it, and post it on all social media. Facebook, yes, but post it on YouTube, post it on Instagram, post it on, on any social media, Twitter, any social media that you participate in. By all means, put them out there. Let's send a signal to the world that we are not idle on this issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So that's my promotion for that. Hey, just one other news item I want to mention. Red Fawn, who is one of the last people standing, standing trial relating to the conflict at Standing Rock, apparently has pled out. She's entered a plea deal to plead to unlawful possession of a firearm, to kind of have the firing of that firearm taken off of out of her charges. And look, I don't know exactly what transpired there. Did she have the weapon? Did she fire the weapon? I don't know. I know that there were some bad decisions made on her part, especially romantically. It turns out that the gun that she is accused of firing belonged to a FBI informant who was infiltrating the water protectors, and that's who she was romantically involved with. So obviously she made some bad decisions as it relates to that. Did those bad decisions really put a gun in her hand and a finger on the trigger? I don't know, but she has pled that out. I mean, she still could be facing some serious jail time, and of course the absurdity of all that is the fact that she could still be facing jail time even with a plea agreement, while the Bundys, who took up arms against the United States, specifically on land they had no claim to, in two separate occasions, and both for grazing rights down in the Southwest, and in a game preserve up in Oregon. The Bundys walk. They're fully acquitted, no matter what they did, no matter how much videotape there is of some of what they did, and not just taking up arms, but the illegal occupation and the damage that they committed to some of these facilities. I mean, it's ironic. But all right, let me get back to what the subject matter of the show really is. Look, the state is on a regular basis, the state and the local officials, non-native officials, on a regular basis are saying that they fully anticipate that they're going to be made whole, as they're calling it, for the loss of revenue from the Seneca gaming facilities. Even though it expired over a year ago, the revenue sharing provision, Niagara Falls, Buffalo, Salamanca, and the state of New York, and the counties who were affected, are saying on a regular basis that they expect the Senecas will resume paying the state and that they will get theirs out of that. I mean, that's what they're saying. And they're saying it often. And as they're saying it, there isn't a whole lot of commentary coming from anybody. And I'm not saying that the Todd Gates or Seneca counselors should be waiting, in the wings to offer a retort to every moronic thing that comes out of a state official or a local official. But there's no letter to the editor. There's no commentary. I mean, even from the average Seneca. So there's almost this sense, because that silence oftentimes, and we know this has been the case in the past, that silence becomes acquiescence. It becomes agreeing through your silence. Now, I'm not saying that any Senecas have agreed to pay the state, but the general sense in the public, the Senecas aren't speaking as strongly as they were speaking a year ago or 6 months ago. So what's up with that? And I think that's kind of the way it's being interpreted. And look, I'm a strong advocate for the Seneca's position on this thing, but I'm not Seneca. I don't represent the Seneca Nation. I talk to Senecas, and I talk to a few counselors, and I'll say that I have not heard any commentary directly that suggests that the Senecas are conceding anything on this thing. But again, I have to say, the state hasn't, the municipalities and the state, they haven't budged at all. Again, not a single city representative has sat with the Senecas to work out any, and not even just the city. I mean community leaders. There's not even a community leader. Church, union, anything, a civic organization. Nobody has come to the Senecas and say, look, we know that you want to do right by us. And you've made it clear. Is there something we can work on? I mean, School 19, the only Native American magnet school in Buffalo, which has no special funding going to it, not even the school district has said, look, would you consider making a contribution to School 19? Nothing. So, and when you consider that, and when you consider the position that those municipalities are in, and the condition of the state's gaming industry, and I got to reiterate what I've talked about in the past, the state's gaming industry, they're what right now is 3 casinos, and they're 6 racinos throughout the state. They're doing terribly. I mean, the Del Lago, on the other side of Rochester, Rivers, which is in casino in Schenectady, and Tioga, which was a racino turned into a full casino in the southern tier. They are over $2 million short from what their projections were. I mean, they've been in operation almost a year, the 3 of them combined. I mean, they've been in operation for almost a year. And they are slated to be $200 million off the mark. I mean, it's almost half of what their projections were. I mean, Del Lago themselves, they were projecting to do $250 million by themselves. And they're over $100 million short of that, or they will be for the year. Moody's has downgraded Del Lago's investor credit rating from stable to negative. They've downgraded them as a rating agency. They're saying that Del Lago isn't pulling in enough revenue to cover its debt service. They can pay the interest on the debt that they owe for this $440 million facility. So why are these places doing badly? Well, I'll tell you why they're doing badly. Because the whole idea of state gaming in rural areas I mean, or even if they are, well, Schenectady's not completely rural, but it's not it is not an urban area that can support gaming in this way. So what they're doing is they're cannibalizing what does exist of the gaming industry in upstate New York, including cannibalizing native gaming. And the Seneca Nation has felt the impact of this stuff. Certainly the Oneidas have. And their racinos have. They've already cut the percentage that Vernon Downs has to pay to the state dramatically because they were about to belly up. And they compete against Turning Stone Casino, the Oneida Casino. But now they're losing revenue to, Schenectady to their east, Del Lago to their west, and Tioga to the south. And they've got their biggest casino still yet to open. It's supposed to open next month, February or March. Down in the Catskills, bigger than Del Lago. So that market is going to continue to saturate. So why is this important? Because I'll tell you why it's important. Because not only does the Seneca Nation, or is the Seneca Nation in a position where they shouldn't be paying the state because this thing expired, I would argue that they can't. This market is saturated. It's a crowded field. If you're a Seneca and you're quick to react to, any changes in the annuities that you receive or to the programs that exist, whether it's housing or anything else, you better be concerned about the revenue that the state is taking from you in terms of their competition in the gaming industry. The Seneca Nation needs to hang on to that 25% of the net slot drop, closer to 50. They need to keep that to offset the decrease in their market share. And I'll tell you, the Seneca Nation needs to diversify because gaming isn't going to get it done for them. Let's keep in mind, the state has all kinds of means for generating revenue, most of it through taxation. And I would argue that their gaming industry is just another taxation. It's just another backhanded tax. How do I figure? Well, consider this. They aren't creating a tourist industry. They don't have Asian gamblers flying in from Hong Kong or Tokyo to gamble in at Del Lago. You know who's gambling at the state casinos? The locals. This is the difference between the Seneca Nation model or the native model and the state model. The Seneca Nation isn't relying on its Seneca people to be the source of their patronage. They are bringing money from outside of the Seneca Nation into the Seneca Nation. That's not what the state's doing. No. See, the state's not just cannibalizing the gaming industry. They're cannibalizing all of the dollars that New York State residents have that would be going to dining out, going to the movies, or going to live theater, or going to, a nightclub to have a few drinks or listen to a live band. Look, any type of hospitality or entertainment is being infringed upon by these casinos. And it's just another way the state can pull money out of its own residents, and not just Albany, because now there's gaming corporations involved. And these gaming corporations aren't necessarily the local guys. Again, here's the difference between Seneca gaming and state gaming. Every dollar that comes into the Seneca Nation still gets spent here in Western New York. The same can't be said for, for the investors, for the shareholders of Del Lago. Who even knows where they are or who they are? Or any of the ones who operate any of the racinos in places like Saratoga or Long Island or any place. I mean, a couple of these gaming corporations were international corporations. They weren't local. Every dollar that comes into the Seneca Nation's gaming facilities ultimately gets spent right back in the same region. The same can't be said for Del Lago or Rivers or Tioga. And it can't be said for any of the racetrack casinos either. So this isn't just the Senecas being greedy or not wanting to help the region, they need to hang on to some market share that the state's been infringing upon. So this end of the 25% revenue sharing isn't just something that termed out. It is something that termed out, but it actually is the shot in the arm that Seneca Gaming needs to maintain its revenue stream. The only, let me repeat, the only revenue stream. The Seneca Nation only has one means for funding its programs, its government. It's everything associated with the operation of the Seneca Nation governing system. All the programs are primarily funded through this gaming. Yeah, I mean, there's some other relations they have with Indian Health Service and stuff like that. But in terms of revenue generating, I mean, the Seneca Nation has some gas stations and stuff like that. But that's pales by comparison. And they are looking at diversifying their economic portfolio, but the bulk of their economy comes from gaming. The state has a whole bunch of different ways that it generates revenue. Not enough, because clearly they're supposed to be like $4 billion short in their projections for this past year. But I think it's important that people understand that the Seneca Nation is funded almost entirely through its gaming enterprises. Including the annuities that the Seneca people get. And the Seneca people better realize that any equivocation on the termed out revenue sharing with the state is going to impact the programs and services and quite possibly the annuities that they receive. So, as I said earlier, if you're silent, not only to the outside, but if you're silent to the people who represent you, the people who are responsible to you, you might not want to remain silent. You want to say, look, we haven't had much of this conversation. But the state and local folks out there keep saying that they're anticipating revenue coming from the Seneca Nation. And from what I understand, we can't afford to pay them as we've paid them. I mean, I just think that we need to be engaged in the folks that claim to be leaders, that certainly are supposed to be our representatives. I know there's some issues happening up in Akwesasne right now, with one of the few longhouses that I really have a great deal of respect for. I've heard guys on people on the men's council referring to the authority that they have. Look, just because you have the ability to sign a document, and that's called signature authority, doesn't mean that you have authority over your people. What it just means is that somebody has said, okay, if you need it's the old Mad Bear thing, need a paper, make a paper. And if you need a signature, okay, we're going to authorize a few of you to be the people who can sign a document. But just because you've been authorized to sign a document doesn't mean you're authorized to make an agreement. Before you can put that your signature down or your title down on that paper, you need to get that permission from us. So this is a problem, and it's a problem that has plagued us for a very, very long time. We as people need to ensure that we are actively engaged in what's happening to our lives, and this is native or non-native. I say it all the time. For anybody who thinks that they can cast a ballot once a year, or once every 2 years, or once every 4 years, and say, there, I fulfilled my civic responsibility, then that's a cop-out. That's an absolute, cop-out. We have a much bigger responsibility to our families, to our communities, and to our nations than pulling a lever in a predetermined election. I mean, that's an absurd proposition. I don't care if it's at the school board level, for the non-native folks, or if it's just making sure that you're there for your neighbor who might be struggling, whether addressing a domestic violence situation. Not my business. Yes, it is. Or you see a child who I mean, look at this crazy situation that just came out of California. How many people must have looked the other way to know that a family could abuse, their 13 children that way? We need to step up, folks. And it's not just over. I'm not saying we need to step up just because of gaming revenue, but to me, this is a perfect example where the lines have been drawn, and because of the lack of engagement on both sides, really, because we're not having dialogue with the people of Western New York to say, look, we're committed to this region, but we're not going to send $100 million or $200 million to the state so a few million dollars can trickle back here. No, we're just not going to do it. Nobody's saying that now. It might have been said 6 months ago, but I think this is the silence that is it's being overrun by the continued voices from state officials and city officials and county officials who say, yeah, the Senecas, they're going to pay. Yeah, they're going to pay. We're going to see this thing. Arbitration is just, in fact, that was the comment. We just have these monies held up by arbitration. Not held up by the fact that it termed out. That arbitration is their last-ditch effort. They think by tying this thing up in arbitration that they can see a resolution. Look, I wanted to bring this issue up because I, too, have been silent on it. So this was my chance to sound off on it. So that's it, folks. I'll be back here Monday, and who knows what I'll talk about then. But keep in mind, we are showing Rumble in New York at the end of the month, and on February 14th we're hoping to get a big showing for the Red Dress campaign for missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
Red blue, red blue, baby, red blue. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but a red man's got red blue. Go to work every day for that minimum wage. There's a guy, blonde hair, blue eyes, just about your age. Hasn't worked and does half as long as you. He makes twice as much money as you.